Good, this is gonna take forever to film.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the long-awaited episode 3 of Hit Battle. Now if you're unfamiliar with the Hit Battle format, basically I'm going to be taking two artists and comparing their respective greatest hits against one another in a series of rounds, until the artist who's won the most rounds by the end of it is declared the winner. And I'm not gonna lie, this is by far the most difficult hit battle I've ever had to do on this channel, since today we have a versus between two of the greatest hip-hop artists of all time, Kanye West and Kendrick Lamar. So in honor of the special occasion, and also just because of the sheer amount of classics that these guys have, we're actually going to be doing a total of 21 rounds today instead of the standard 11. So sit back, get comfy, make sure to follow me on Instagram if you want to vote on any future hit battles that I do, and let's just get started with round 1. And funnily enough, after all that build up in the intro, we begin this versus with probably the easiest round of all 21. While Stronger does have a little bit of overplay fatigue for me, looking at it purely as a song, it has gotta be one of the best pop rap hits of the 2000s. The production still holds up phenomenally with those heavy drums and constant synth jabs throughout the track that perfectly fit around the iconic Daft Punk sample. And something I really appreciate about the sample is that as opposed to just taking one clip of it and using it as a loop over the entire song, the sample is actually chopped up in a fairly unique way. Kanye also comes through with an amazing chorus and two verses filled with peak graduation era Ye confidence and humor. Really makes you wonder what happened to that guy in 2024, huh? And one part I still really love to this day is how he uses the Daft Punk sample to finish some of the lines of his. Super creative choice. Obviously, we've all heard this song so many times at this point, but more than 16 years later, I'd say it still absolutely holds up. And now this isn't really going to be a great note to start on with Kendrick admittedly, but I honestly think that Humble is super overrated. Now don't get me wrong, it is still an alright track. The beat is simple but hard, and Kendrick has some classic lines on it. But what really holds it back for me is just how basic it feels for a Kendrick song. Like, you can tell that it was clearly made to be the lead single for Damn, and so I think a lot of the masterful lyricism and themes that Kendrick's music is defined by were both significantly dumbed down on this track for the sake of it being more listenable. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with that, as we'll soon see, some of my favorite Kendrick tracks are the ones that perfectly combine his complex lyricism with listenability. With Humble, it's just a little bit too generic to stand the test of time for me. So with me still loving Stronger and not really loving Humble, Kanye's gonna take round 1 here. Alright, hey everyone, this is me from the future here. Just gonna be taking you through the community votes that I mentioned earlier with these rounds. Starting with the first, which actually Humble took 55% to 45%. Kinda crazy, I'm not gonna lie to you.
So hard, motherfuckers wanna find me. That shit great.
Trees is the perfect place for shade, and that's just how I feel.
Okay, now this one is a great hit song matchup. Starting with Paris, just what an absolute banger of a track. First of all, you've got that excellent Jay-Z verse, which I swear has just become the theme song for basketball at this point with how iconic the ball so hard repetition is. And on top of that, there's some great braggadocio within the lyrics. I especially love the Michael line in the middle. And the beat as well is a perfect example of something being simple while still getting the job done and then some. Then of course you've got Ye's verse, where kinda like in Stronger, he just shows off so much raw ego in the lyrics while still managing to have some hilarious bars in there. But honestly, still to this day, my favorite part of this track is the outro. The change in the beat at that point gives me heavy proto-Yeezus vibes, which is great for me since I'm a pretty big fan of Yeezus. And then Kanye's refrain of "You are now watching the throne, don't let me get in my zone" over the dramatic production is such a cool moment.
Now watching the throne, don't let me into my zone, don't let me into my zone.
Really, if I had to summarize my thoughts though, I'd once again make a comparison to Stronger. Well, that was a perfect rap hit for 2000s Kanye. Paris is a perfect rap hit for 2010s Kanye, which as we all know are two completely different people. And now as opposed to Humble, Money Trees is a Kendrick hit that has absolutely stood the test of time and is honestly a rap classic at this point. Like I was alluding to earlier, this is one of those Kendrick tracks that you can bump anytime you want, but it still packs so much into the lyrics to the point where every time you listen, you can discover something new about the song. As for the sound of the track, the Beach House sample works incredibly well as the main melody of the instrumental. The hook is long but infectious, and the bridge by Anna Wise never fails to get stuck in my head.
Be the last one not to get this dough. Don't wait, love one of your bucket-headed hoes.
But obviously, the real highlight is the lyrics, with both Kendrick and J-Rock in his feature talking about the struggle to obtain wealth, while still ultimately knowing that it's only temporary satisfaction. Hence Kendrick equating wealth with a money tree protecting him with shade, not necessarily fixing the problem of the sunlight, but only temporarily subduing it. Of course, you've also got a ton of other great stuff in here, like Kendrick recapping the story of Good Kid, Mad City in the first verse, and the line "Everybody gon' respect the shooter, but the one in front of the gun lives forever" has always stuck with me for being worded so powerfully. But truthfully, there really is just too much here for me to be able to explain every subtle bit of wordplay and storytelling in it, since I don't want this video to be like an hour long. So I'll leave it at this. Money Trees is a masterpiece, and one of the many examples of Kendrick's insane pen game. Definitely a close round here, and while Paris is a perfect banger, Money Trees is just so important, so I think I'm gonna have to go with it here. Alright, and as for the community vote with round 2, Paris actually took it this time, 55 to 45, so I guess I'm 0 for 2 with these.
Yeah. At first
God, why did I make this versus 21 whole rounds? Now that we're out of the hit song section, we're gonna be reaching some of the most insanely difficult to decide rounds yet. And this one is definitely the first of them. I mean, with Dark Fantasy, just what an intro. This is just one of those tracks that I will never forget hearing for the first time, as it was actually one of the first Kanye West songs I had ever heard. And I remember hearing that chorus performed by Justin Vernon and Tiana Taylor after Nicki Minaj's intro, and just being absolutely blown away by its maximalist beauty. And then hearing the transition into the main beat with those chimes and strings all in the background, the instrumental is simply luxurious. Kanye also has some all-timers when it comes to the lyrics on here. Here's some of my favorites on the screen right now, with my absolute favorite having to be, "Too many Urkels on your team, that's why your win's low." And another thing I have to give this song credit for is functioning perfectly as an intro to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, while still being fantastic as a standalone song. I feel like a lot of album intro tracks run into the problem where they're only enjoyable to listen to within the context of listening to the entire album. Like for example, Alone Again off The Weeknd's After Hours. Amazing intro to the record, but I rarely listen to it as a track on its own. Dark Fantasy, on the other hand, is a song that I could listen to in any context and it's still slapping. And now on to Wesley's Theory. I'm gonna say it again. What an intro. Now this is something I'm sure we're gonna get into a little bit later, but with Good Kid Mad City, I feel like one of its biggest flaws is that some of the production hasn't aged very well. But I only mention this right now to contrast it with To Pimp a Butterfly, whose production has only gotten better with time, with Wesley's Theory being one of my favorite produced tracks across the entire thing. It's a straight G-Funk banger smothered in Thundercat's iconic thick and warbly bass tone, as well as some incredible synth work. All of it just fits together so well to create a simultaneously smooth but haunting sound. And Kendrick's lyrics about how the traditionally white American governmental systems take young and ignorant black artists who find career success and exploit them for tax profits are extremely poignant and perfectly set up the overarching themes of TPAB. Overall, the song functions excellently lyric-wise, both as an intro to the overarching message of the record and as its own track with its own narrative. And one last thing that I'd like to praise with this song is actually Kendrick's vocals. From his layered hook to how he raps in a more youthful tone in the first verse to emulate the younger version of himself which he raps from the perspective of, you can just tell that every little inflection in his voice was a deliberate choice, which is something I can't praise enough. You see what I mean now when I said that these rounds are going to be basically impossible to decide? But after much deliberation, I've decided to give the round to Dark Fantasy, mainly because the chorus is just one of those moments that is just indescribably beautiful that Kanye's discography is loaded with. But even still, Wesley's Theory losing really hurts. And on to the first one that I actually agree with you guys on, Dark Fantasy took it, again, 55 to 45.
We on a ultralight beam. We on a ultralight beam. Loyalty got royalty inside my DNA. Cocaine quarter piece.
Okay, I'll admit it with this one. This matchup is just straight up cursed. I've never seen two songs go against each other that are both so good and yet so insanely different. I mean, Ultralight Beam is a tearjerker, and I'm not even really a religious person, but I think the beauty of this song really transcends its subject matter, which I think is just a testament to how good Kanye's pure musicality is. Well, this chorus and verse are perfectly minimal to allow for the backing gospel choir and production to be the highlight. And speaking of the production, I love the contrast between the softer chords and the heavier drums that break up every measure. But of course, I have to talk about the real highlight here, that of course being Chance the Rapper's verse. I mean, I think it says something about the quality of your performance on a track if you have the balls to rap the line, "I met Kanye West, I'm never going to fail," and I wholeheartedly believe you just based off of how good the rest of the verse is. Granted, that line did end up aging like milk, but my point still stands. And looking at the track as an intro to the life of Pablo, it's kind of funny since this song was originally going to be the outro, but I think it works way better as the opener. It's almost like the antithesis of Bound 2 off of Yeezus, where instead of ending the record with a total sonic switch up, it gives you a completely different expectation of what the rest of the album will sound like just by nature of it being the first track, which works perfectly with the theme of unpredictability that T-Lop has. Just an exquisite piece of music and undeniably Kanye's best straight up gospel track. And what do we have to go against the heavenly Ultralight Beam? Maybe Kendrick's darkest banger of all time, on par with Mad City or The Black of the Berry. Now I'll admit, I'm one of those weirdos who thinks Damn is in the conversation for being Kendrick's best album, and DNA, despite it being a little overplayed, is one of the record's many highlights. Kendrick's aggressive first verse describing all of the good and bad things he believes to be intrinsically part of him fits super well over the menacing instrumental. And one little touch that I love is that throughout the verse, Kendrick actually names 23 things that are in his DNA, which also happens to be the exact number of chromosome pairs within human DNA. Overall, it's a great first half, but of course the real highlight comes after the beat switch, where Kendrick just ups the explosiveness of the track to 11, absolutely tearing the second beat up. The Rick James vocal chop across the instrumental is crazy too. And finally, I'm just a massive fan of when Kendrick makes more explicitly wicked music. Don't get me wrong, I love the more sonically upbeat and anthemic Kendrick songs, but still my favorite sound from him is undoubtedly a lot closer to the sound of DNA and the rest of Damn. But thankfully, as I was writing this portion of the script, the choice between these two tracks actually felt a lot easier to make. I'm going with Ultra Light Beam, almost exclusively due to the overplay fatigue of DNA. And community votes for round 4, DNA took it 54-46. Very close, but makes sense, I guess.
Bam!
Okay, now, this is funnily enough a matchup that I think a lot of people assume is way easier than it actually is. And I already talked about how Bound 2 functions perfectly at the end of an album like Yeezus, but as a song itself, it's amazing and definitely one of Kanye's best. Of course, you got that legendary sampling of the song Bound by the Ponderosa Twins +1. And while the sample is flipped in a fairly basic way, with the instrumental mostly being nothing but the sample, I think the authenticity of the instrumentation is a perfect fit as not only a contrast to the rest of Yeezus, but also as a way to make you really pay attention to what Kanye's actually saying with his lyrics, with the whole song being a love letter from Kanye to Kim Kardashian. Speaking of the lyrics, one thing that I especially love with Bound 2 is that with a song dedicated to an artist partner, you'd really expect the lines to be all lovey-dovey and innocent, but nope. Kanye is just as crass as he is on every other song off of Yeezus, and yet the song still feels genuinely very heartfelt and sweet, just in a very explicit Kanye way. Oh, and how could I forget, the Charlie Wilson interludes that break up the verses are simply stunning. As we all know, Kanye West is an extremely unique artist, but out of all of his tracks, Bound 2 is the one where every time I listen to it, I just think to myself, man, no one else on planet Earth could make this song except Kanye, which I think is really the biggest compliment I could give. And I know on the surface this does not seem like a fair matchup at all, but Compton in my opinion is a criminally underrated Kendrick track for me. Probably top 5 off of Good Kid Mad City, maybe even top 3. First of all, I think it's one of the best produced songs in the record with a super nostalgic sounding beat from Just Blaze. Then you've got Dr. Dre dropping 3 great verses with Lambo in Heaven but for now I'm on the Red Eye being a ridiculously hard bar. But easily the best aspect of this track is Kendrick and the story behind his verses. For those who don't know, Kendrick wrote the verses to this song the first day he met Dr. Dre, which he says he considers to be the first day of his new life as a rapper. But also, the song functions as an epilogue to the story of Good Kid Mad City, with Kendrick retrospectively rapping about the events in his life that led him to escape the cycle of gang violence that he talks about for the rest of the album. So in a way, the song acts as a bridge between Kendrick's life as a child in Compton to where he is now as a famous rapper. It's awesome, and it makes the track easily up there as one of Kendrick's most important of all time. But with all that being said, no matter how much I can praise Compton for, I think it'd be a crime to say that it's a better song than Bound 2. And we have our first absolute blowout here with the community vote, with Bound 2 taking it 81-19. Not unexpected, I guess. Like I said, Compton's pretty underrated, but still, this is kind of crazy.
Niggas is savage, niggas is monsters, niggas is pimp. Oh, Lamar, Hail Mary, Hail Mary.
Now this is a good round. While I do think I have my choice picked already, this is one that I could see being a lot of debate for, especially with the immense rise in popularity violent crimes has had due to TikTok. But trend aside, I've been saying since Ye came out that this is maybe Kanye's best outro track ever. It is so good. First I'll say, I absolutely love 070 Shake's somber intro verse and chorus. Not only are the lyrics otherworldly and tragic, but the sound of it is almost analogous to a lullaby, which I think is incredibly fitting for the song's topic. And speaking of that topic, it might just be my favorite that Kanye covers across his entire discography, with him talking about how his view of women has drastically changed after having daughters. Kanye's famously been a womanizer across the majority of his career, so hearing him actually reflect upon how flawed his views on women are, even just for one verse, is so beautifully cathartic. And the birth of his 2 daughters being the catalyst for this change in his mindset is a similarly beautiful sentiment. I know the verse wasn't actually written by him, and with 2024 Kanye being all but back to his toxic ways, the song does lose a little bit of emotional value, but trying to look at it through a vacuum, both the sound and message of the song are pretty damn incredible, even as someone who can't directly relate. Now, Kendrick's Duckworth is a feat of lyricism, simply put. So much so that I'd rather start by talking about the track's sound, since there's so much to dive into with the lyrics. As for the sound, Kendrick's rapping is filled with so much hunger, and his flows are consistently excellent. And the fact that we get 3 separate beats on here is insane. But obviously the story is where the track shines the most, so let's just get into that now. In Duckworth, Kendrick describes a true story about his father, nicknamed Ducky, and his manager Top Dog, then known as Anthony. Back then, Anthony was a gangbanger who had previously robbed the KFC that Ducky worked at, and fearing another stick-up, Ducky made sure to get on Anthony's good side by giving him free food. And as luck would have it, when Anthony eventually did rob the restaurant again, Ducky was spared due to his kindness previously. So if Ducky hadn't known about the impending robbery, he could have very well been killed during it, which would have led Kendrick to growing up without a father for the majority of his life. And Anthony most likely would have been arrested and therefore unable to sign Kendrick to Top Dog Entertainment years later, meaning Kendrick would have never become the famous rapper he is now. Already, the story itself is incredibly captivating, especially since it's true as far as we know. But what truly makes it work within a song is Kendrick's top-notch storytelling ability. I vividly remember hearing this track for the first time and following the entire plot perfectly as it continued. And by the time I got to the final 4 lines, I was in total shock. Which is a feeling I can confidently say I've only gotten from a very small handful of songs in my entire life. Like I said earlier, I already have my choice for this round picked. And while Violent Crimes is phenomenally written, Duckworth just displays a different level of pen game. Alright, and community vote for round 6, Duckworth took it 60% to 40%.
Beautiful morning, you're the sun of my morning bed. I love myself. The world is a ghetto, big guns and dick.
And finally, we get to another matchup that I think is relatively easy to decide. Starting with Father Stretch My Hands, that's one of those songs that I think I could genuinely listen to every single day and not get sick of it. Like, it is legitimately just free serotonin. For one, it's the perfect length to replay over and over at just over 2 minutes. Then you've got Kid Cudi's perfect hook on it. I swear, I wake up with that shit in my head along with the video of all of them jumping around at the MSG listening party at least once a month. And on top of all of that, it has got easily Kanye's best beat drop ever, and one of the best beat drops ever made. Like, this drop is so good that it made the Metro tag attached to it probably the most iconic producer tag of all time. Now, as for Kanye's verse on it, I mean, obviously you've got the bleached asshole line, but like it or not, you have to admit that it is one of the most quotable Ye lines ever, mainly just due to the way he says it. And I mean, come on, you cannot deny that the bar is funny, especially considering it's on a song called Father Stretch My Hands. Need not remind you, one song after Ultralight Beam on The Life of Pablo. I don't say this a lot, but I would absolutely consider Father Stretch My Hands Part 1 to be a perfect song, even if I don't think it's Kanye's best. And now on to I by Kendrick. Dare I say that this is another track that's criminally underrated. It is just so much fun. I love the Isley Brothers sample that makes up the instrumental. It almost reminds me of an Outkast song. Plus, Kendrick's rapping is as good as ever, with amazing and catchy flows, as well as a great vocal performance. I especially love how Kendrick's vocals get more and more powerful in the intro and the lead up to the chorus, so when it finally comes in, the energy is just so infectious. And lyrically, I can really appreciate the positive tone that this song takes, with it being all about loving yourself no matter what the world throws at you. It's a simple but really powerful message, especially on the first single Kendrick released after Good Kid Mad City, a very dark album lyrically. Also, for those who don't know, the version of I that's on To Pimp a Butterfly is actually different from the single version, with it being a live recording of the song instead, and it actually features a lot of different lyrics, but I'm only going to be including the single version in this format. Although shout out to Kendrick for making a live version of a song so good that I can reasonably listen to it over the single version a lot of the time. But like I said in the beginning, this is a pretty easy matchup. While I is a great song both sound-wise and lyric-wise, it does not stand a chance against Father Stretch My Hands in my opinion. And we've got another pretty big gap here, with Father Stretch My Hands taking it 75% to 25%.
I gotta testify. Come up in the spot looking extra fly. We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright.
Yeah, you see that right? I took my jacket off. It's getting way too fucking hot in my room, and we are a third of the way through. Weirdly enough, I think we've got another pretty easy matchup here with Touch the Sky versus Alright. Although I think a lot of people would call it a harder matchup than I would. First off, listening to Touch the Sky again for this video just really made me miss when Kanye was still able to rap like this, man. Like, his 2 verses on here are just filled with so much charisma and so many great lines. My personal favorite probably being when he ends his first verse with, "A hip-hop legend, I think I died in the accident cause this must be heaven." But even with how good Kanye's verses are in here, Lupe Fiasco absolutely steals the show. That man is simply one of the best lyricists on a technical level of all time, and despite being very early into his career at the time of the song coming out, his verse on it is no exception. "Hear like ear till I'm beer on the curb, peach fuzz buzz but beard on the verge," or "Touche, Lupe cool as the unthawed, but I still feel possessed as a gun charge, come as correct as a porn star." Like, come on, he is different. And of course, I can't forget to mention the excellent production with those incredible horns. It's just simply another amazing track to come out in a time where Kanye was virtually incapable of missing. But with all that being said, Alright might be Kendrick Lamar's most important and culturally relevant song, despite it being almost 10 years old now. Obviously, its major theme of police brutality against black people is extremely cutting, but Kendrick once again manages to channel some level of optimism even while covering these struggles, just through the simple phrase of, We Gon' Be Alright. But even outside of its cultural impact, the song is undoubtedly incredible. The instrumental is one of the strongest across T-Pab, with Pharrell on production being a huge reason as to why. You've also got that incredible saxophone over the beat courtesy of Terrace Martin, and Kendrick's performance on the song is an all-timer for sure. The second verse especially is so good with the run-on flow that he uses, it works so well with the instrumental.
Thinking of my partner, put the candy painting on a Rico, digging in my pocket, in a profit big enough to feed you every day my life.
And I know that I'm mentioning vocal performance a lot when it comes to Kendrick, but I honestly think that just because of how masterful his writing is, his actual vocal presence on a song is severely overlooked most of the time. And I know that I just said that I don't say this a lot, but I genuinely think it's another perfect track. I mean, I really can't think of anything I'd change about it. So even though Touch the Sky is certainly a classic, Alright is just far too important for it to lose to what's not even a top 50 Kanye song for me. And here we have the new closest round, I believe, with Alright taking it over Touch the Sky 52% to 48, which is wild to me.
How could you be so heartless?
Maybe I wasn't there.
So this round, I don't even really know if it's difficult or not, but it's certainly a very weird matchup. Credit to Heartless immediately though for low-key being the first emo rap song ever. I mean, all of 808s and Heartbreak inspired the rise of that sound in the 2010s, but I think the success of Heartless as a single, despite how critically panned 808s was at the time, was what really created the influence. But even putting all of that outside stuff aside and judging Heartless purely as a song, man, has it aged well. This is another one where I'll just wake up with the hook in my head super often. And funnily enough, it's technically another Kid Cudi hook since he did write it. There's also the production, which while sounding so different from everything Kanye was making before that, still holds up super well. All those little weird noises utilized throughout, like the synth stabs, the titular 808s, and even the organs that come in every once in a while, just blend together very well for whatever reason.
How could you be so heartless?
And despite the heavy use of autotune, Kanye vocally sounds great. His melodies are super memorable. In general, I honestly think that Ye doesn't get enough credit as an actual singer, even if he's not the best technically. He just has a certain vocal tone to him that really makes his emotions come through whenever he sings, would be my best way of describing it. Everything on Heartless just comes together to create something that is very minimal, but still has managed to stand the test of time, evident by the fact that it's actually on track to become Kanye's most streamed song within a couple months. Now, Pride on the other hand, well, I wouldn't call it minimal, is certainly a very singular Kendrick track. Like, I really cannot think of any other song that sounds quite like it, let alone any other Kendrick song. Obviously, you've got that very psychedelic guitar, which I believe was played by Steve Lacy, and it, along with the mesmerizing chorus, makes for a track that truly hypnotizes me in the moment like no other. And lyrically speaking, if I'm being honest, I don't really pay attention to the words when I listen to this one, but its themes are still very interesting within the context of Damn. With Pride being the first song of the tracklist on the standard album to be named after one of the 7 deadly sins, it features a lot of interesting religious themes, such as when Kendrick says, "Sick venom in men and women overcome with pride, a perfect world is never perfect, only filled with lies." Another thing I really appreciate is how Kendrick's vocals are either pitched up or down to represent whether he's talking about his ideals versus his actions respectively. It's a super cool sonic touch.
I ain't perfect, I probably won't come around. This time I might put you down. Last time I ain't.
And while we're talking about vocals, man, Kendrick sounds so depressed and lethargic over this song, but it fits perfectly with the instrumental. Once again showing his vocal talent, I think. I hate to say it here, but this round for me really just comes down to the fact that these two songs are so extremely different. And while I think I respect Pride as a piece of music more, it's a song that I really have to be in a certain mood to properly enjoy. Whereas Heartless is just a more enjoyable track. And just like that, the record for new closest has been broken with the very next round, Heartless taking it 51% to 49%. Absolutely insane.
I wanna scream so loud for you, cause I'm so proud of you. Daddy issues all across my head, told me fuck a foul, I'm teary-eyed.
You see what I did here with this round, right? One of them is about Kanye's mom, the other one's about Kendrick's dad, and God, both of these songs have absolutely broken me many times. With Hey Mama, it might be Kanye West's most emotional and heartfelt song ever, with it just being a simple love letter to his mother, Donda West. And with the context of her passing only a few years after the release of this song, it makes it absolutely devastating to listen to. Like, whenever I hear this track now, I can only think of the video of Kanye performing it during the Yeezus tour and just breaking down crying in the middle of it. It is just heartbreaking. And even separating Donda's passing from it, the song is just so sweet, with so many charming lines from 2000s era Kanye on it, like, "And you would give me anything in this world, Michael Jackson leather and a glove but didn't give me a curl," and they are perfectly balanced out by the more serious lines that convey just how much Kanye loved his mom, and how happy he was to finally achieve enough success where he could give back to her for everything that she did for him. But with all that being said, I hate to say it, but I do have one gripe with this song. Admittedly a very stupid one, but I can't not mention it. I just think the instrumental outro is too long, and it really kills the replayability of this song. But ignoring that, everything from the soulful instrumental to the lyrics to Kanye's heartfelt singing and rapping makes Hey Mama one of Kanye's most beautiful tracks of all time. But still, this might honestly be the new hardest round for me to decide, since I think Father Time is one of Kendrick's hardest hitting songs. On the track, Kendrick details the struggles he went through growing up with a more traditional, tough love style father, and how his teachings ingrained harmful lessons into Kendrick, like men aren't supposed to show emotion, or prioritize your livelihood over your mental health since life is inherently tough. And the way he articulates these points in these lines are just so cutting. Like when he says, "Daddy issues ball across my head, told me fuck a foul, I'm teary-eyed, wanna throw my hands, I won't think out loud," or "His mama died, I asked him why you going back to work so soon. His first reply was, son, that's life, and Bill's got no silver spoon." And the way he connects his own personal trauma with his father to the generational trauma a lot of young boys go through that eventually ends up perpetuating toxic masculinity is just genius. And the cherry on top of all of this, the song sounds incredible as well, with a gorgeous instrumental and otherworldly chorus from Sampha.
Early morning wake ups, practicing on day ups, tough love, bottled up.
And real quick while we are talking about Sampha, if you haven't heard the unreleased track with him and Kendrick called I'm Better, my god are you missing out, go give it a listen right now. But yeah, Father Time is a phenomenal song, and probably my favorite off of Mr. Morale. So despite how much it hurts to see Hey Mama lose, if I was only allowed to listen to one of these two tracks for the rest of my life, I just don't think that I could give up Father Time. And my god, we are not stopping with these really close rounds. Hey Mama takes it 53-47.
And maybe they'll come to life. This feeling is unmatched. This feeling is brought to you by adrenaline and good rap.
And you know what? Now that we're halfway through the verses, I'm gonna switch it up and talk about Kendrick's songs first. So starting with Mama, the first thing I gotta mention is that beautiful, lush instrumental. Shit actually gets me levitating. And then Kendrick comes through with such an interesting flow over it, because he's not really flowing with the beat even, it's more that he's rapping around it, if that makes sense. Either way, I think it's super cool, and of course lyrically it's also amazing. With Kendrick talking about his own personal growth after his struggles with himself, as well as what he calls Lucy, which is meant to be short for Lucifer, aka the devil. And one thing that I absolutely love that he does is by the end of the For Sale interlude, one track before this one on TPAP, Kendrick ends with the line, "Until I came home." And this track is all about Kendrick metaphorically coming home to Mama. But the title Mama actually has multiple meanings, with the first being the aforementioned literal meaning of Kendrick coming home to his mother in Compton, and the second being Kendrick going on a trip to South Africa in 2014 that inspired a lot of the making of TPAP, thus in a sense going back to his motherland. And this in and of itself connects to the third verse of the song where Kendrick describes meeting a boy that resembles him while on his South Africa trip. And don't think that I can't see you down there in the comments about to spam the nerd emoji on me. But when we're talking about Kendrick Lamar songs, there really is just that much to unpack most of the time. But back to Mama, it's simply another incredible song, and quite possibly my favorite on To Pimp a Butterfly when it comes to pure sonic palette. And speaking of sound, Come to Life is a track that absolutely thrives in that regard, like many of Kanye's best songs. The best compliment I think I can give to it is honestly just to say, I really still can't believe that this track is technically underrated with how amazing it is. For one, it's got one of Kanye's best singing performances ever. You can just feel the raw power and emotion in his voice for this one. And while it is admittedly nowhere near the same level as Mama lyrically, I actually think that with the sound of this track, the more simplistic lyrics really enhance the message Kanye goes for on here, with him expressing his desire for a change in his life after his divorce with Kim Kardashian, but eventually realizing that despite the trials and tribulations that he's experienced as of late, his children will always be the silver lining that he can look towards. And with such a sweet message, I find it super fitting that he references Ultra Light Beam with a line on here, since both tracks have a very similar level of beauty. But still, by far the most impressive part of the song is within the instrumental, specifically that piano that comes in during the second half. I have heard so many different stories, from it being played by Tyler the Creator to some random 6-year-old girl that's apparently some virtuoso musician, but no matter who played it, it along with the Mike Dean synths make for genuinely one of the most indescribably stunning sonic moments across all of Kanye's discography, a discography known for having incredible sonic moments. It really is one of those moments that I can only describe with words so well. You just have to listen to the song yourself. And it makes Come to Life easily the most underrated Kanye track in my opinion. But despite how much I do love Come to Life, I think this is one of those rounds where the combo of immaculate writing and incredible sound of Mama give it the edge. And as for the community vote for this one, Come to Life takes it over Mama 75% to 25%, so I guess it's not that underrated.
Oh, here we go, baby. Don't worry. I'm sensitive. I feel everything. I feel everybody.
Now this absolutely has to be the weirdest matchup so far. I don't think these two songs could sound more different than they do from each other. With Mother I Sober, I've heard it be described as the most serious and important song Kendrick Lamar has ever made. And while I don't necessarily agree with that notion, I could totally see how a Kendrick fan could believe that with just how somber it feels. It's near 7 minutes of Kendrick not even really rapping, but just speaking over a gentle piano and some drums. And when it comes to the lyricism, it really does function as the perfect centerpiece to Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, with Kendrick detailing witnessing his mother's sexual abuse and other family trauma while growing up. And he connects it to his own mistakes that he's made when it comes to his lust and infidelity, and the remorse he feels for his actions, as well as once again, the generational trauma that affects many within the Black community as a result of their upbringing. But as the song finishes, Kendrick metaphorically breaks the cycle of abuse by demonstrating how he's worked on himself as a person. It's the song for me off of Mr. Morale that really made me understand what people mean when they call the album a therapy session, since it truly just feels like Kendrick having a conversation with the listener. Although I do feel like I have to mention this now every time that this song is mentioned, even though it is complex lyrically, it is unfathomably embarrassing to listen to this song and then take the lesson as, oh, Kendrick's a piece of shit because he got molested, especially when he explicitly states that he wasn't on the track. Drake. Anyways, Mother I Sober, while certainly not being the most listenable song of all time, is a track that I have a hell of a lot of respect for. And I know that I just said Come to Life is Kanye's most underrated song, but if we're talking about pre-2020, it is easily Paranoid. This song especially really makes me appreciate Kanye's versatility when it comes to music. Like, bro actually made a straight up synth-pop dance track in 2007, like 15 years before the synth-pop revival wave we got with The Weeknd and Dua Lipa. It's crazy. And like with Heartless, the more strange elements of the production just work so well together, like some of the synths in it and the punchy drums. You've also got that insanely catchy chorus from both Kanye and Mr. Hudson, and I like how on this track, Kanye kind of merges his more standard rapping style with the more melodic nature of 808s together in his verse.
Cause I can make it good, I can make it hood, I can make it come, I can make it go, I can make it
I actually don't have too much more to say on this one. I just think it's a super fun song that gets slept on way too hard. Here's where it gets tough though, because once again, I have to decide whether I prefer the writing on Mother I or the sound of Paranoid. And you know what? I'll be blunt here and say that Mother I Sober is definitely a better song, but I like Paranoid more. So, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna go with Paranoid. Fight me. And for the community vote for this one, I'm actually quite surprised that Paranoid took it, 53 to 47, since Mother I Sober is usually seen as one of Kendrick's best all-time tracks. But I guess people just think Paranoid's better.
I chip a nigga a little bit of nothing. I chip a nigga.
I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like we've just done like 10 sad songs in a row now, so let's liven it up with two absolute slappers from Kanye and Kendrick. On an album that has as many bangers as Damn does, XXX still stands out as maybe the hardest. The build-up for one is just so good, from the peaceful singing in the intro from Bacon, to the transition to the main beat and Kendrick's more understated delivery, to the part where he amps up the energy like crazy as the sirens come in. It is just incredible.
I wait in front of niggas spot and watch him hit his block. I catch a nigga leaving service if that's all.
Not to mention the tone fits perfectly with the story of the song, with Kendrick in the second verse rapping about a friend of his who called to ask for prayers after his son was killed. But at this point in the album, Kendrick's wickedness is all but overtaking him, and he says to the man that he can't give him closure, because if he was in that situation, he would, quote, chip a man then throw the blower in his lap, walk myself to the court like bitch I did that. And he reiterates that if somebody messes with those he loves, he will absolutely break his moral code to seek revenge. It's a really interesting concept for a song, at least in the first half, because while I do absolutely love it, I'm not nearly as big of a fan of the second half. Firstly, I think U2's contribution to the track is pretty mid at best, and while Kendrick's last verse diving into more overtly political topics like gun control and the presidency is cool, I just can't help but feel like the second half is good enough to warrant the transition from the much stronger first. Still though, an amazing song overall. But Black Skinhead, on the other hand, there are days where I genuinely consider it to be the hardest song of all time. It is on another level of banger. The drums, for one, are ridiculously hard, especially all the parts where they're just being absolutely slammed. And then you've got Kanye's hums in the background that are made to sound like a guitar. It's almost got like a tribal vibe to it, which is so fucking cool to me. And on top of all of that, Kanye's energy on the song is just unmatched, especially on the chorus where he is just coming through with pure mania by the end of it.
But I ain't finished, I'm devoted, and you know it, and you know it.
And I'll admit, some of the bars here are pretty stupid, like the Romans line, but weirdly enough, I actually think that the bars being objectively wrong make the song better, since it just feels like Ye doesn't even give a shit about what he's saying, and he's just rapping for the pure energy of it. And God, that outro where he's just saying God over and over again, by that point I'm ready to explode. This is one that I think would be a lot harder for most people, but since I don't really love the second half of XXX, I think this round easily goes to Black Skinhead. It's just too visceral. And thankfully, the community vote is back on my good side again, with Black Skinhead taking it 68% to 32%.
I had a dream I could buy my way to heaven when I
bend down,
Where you from, nigga? Fuck.
Okay, so I know that I said that I think Good Kid, Mad City is a little overrated, and truthfully, I thought the same about the song Mad City, until I revisited it for this video, and goddamn, what was I smoking? The best word I could really use to describe the first half of this track would be brutal. From the dramatic instrumental to Kendrick's dark and vivid imagery he uses to describe the constant gang violence he witnessed growing up in Compton, and it feels so weird to call lines so sinister iconic, but they really are, like the intro with "If Pyrus and Crips all got along, they'd probably gun me down by the end of the song," or "That was back when I was 9, Joey packed the 9, and not really a lyric, but I can't not mention the Yaks by Schoolboy Q. But now we get to the second half of the song, and honestly, I think I only didn't like this part on first listen because of my car speakers, funnily enough. Listening back on headphones though, it really is not mixed as bad as I thought it was originally. In fact, I think the instrumental is actually super cool with its old school sound, especially in that outro with the classic Dre sounding synth. And both Kendrick and MC8 come through with great verses over it. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that Mad City grew on me a lot. And now on to Can't Tell Me Nothing. Fittingly enough, it also has a super iconic intro with the "Wait till I get my money right" line. But besides that, the song is simply a banger. Crazy, I know. The sample in the instrumental is so memorable for one, and I love all of Jeezy's ad-libs across the track. They really add to the hype of the song. And as you would expect from a song off of Graduation, Kanye comes through with such a great performance where you can just feel his confidence through each verse. Not to mention he starts off verse 1 with one of the hardest lines ever rapped. However, I actually have a bit of a hot take when it comes to this song. Similar to Hey Mama, I just think it's too long. Like, I really think that besides that "Devil Wear Prada" line, Kanye's third verse is overall pretty weak, and could absolutely be cut off of the song. Maybe it's just the amount of spacing in between each line, but I don't know, it just feels like it kinda drags to me. But even with that, Can't Tell Me Nothing is still one of Kanye's most iconic bangers. It's funny, if you had asked me which song I'd take out of these two like a week ago, I would have easily said Can't Tell Me Nothing. But I guess re-listening to all these songs for this video really is important, since I definitely take Mad City now. And once again, another insanely close one here, with Mad City taking it 53 to 47. To be fair though, I was pretty back and forth with this one as well, so I understand the closeness.
How long you niggas bob all day, nigga? 30 minutes later, my future favors the legendary status of a hip-hop rhyme.
And now, taking a break from the album cuts, we get to talk about some of Kanye and Kendrick's most iconic non-album singles. And look, I love when Kendrick tackles a powerful message in his songs, but sometimes I just want to hear the man talk his shit, and this song absolutely delivers. Just 5 minutes worth of non-stop top-tier rapping across such distinct instrumentals, from the slow and gorgeous first beat, to the beat that would eventually turn into the beat for Fear in the second, to that deep bassy beat with those echoed out keys in the third.
House on the hill, house on the beach, nigga. A condo in Compton, I'm still in reach, nigga.
And dare I say, the track has overall one of Kendrick's best rapping performances ever. It's just so many memorable lines. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I am the greatest rapper alive. The hook of "Don't tell a lie on me and I won't tell the truth about you" is just aged like fine wine with the release of Euphoria. And then the way he closes it out is just so sick, where he drops the original release date of Damn. The whole track really just feels like Kendrick going as far as possible to remind everyone that despite his absence at the time, he was still on top of the rap game, and I think that is absolutely awesome to hear. Now with All Day, this track is just an absolute fucking mess of insanity, but in like the best way possible. First off, it's got like 10 separate producers, including Kanye, Mike Dean, Travis Scott, French Montana, and Diddy. And you can just hear it through how chaotic the instrumental is across the song's 5-minute runtime. At one point it sounds like a normal trap song, then the next second it transitions to a song that sounds like Yeezus on steroids, and then the next you're getting Paul McCartney whistling while playing guitar. It's wild. But if there's one thing Ye's good at, he can really merge all of these wildly different sounds together in such a compelling way. And man, again, I miss when Kanye was still able to rap like this. His 2 verses on here have absolutely stellar flows and so many funny bars. Like when he says, "Told him I've been on 10 since the 10th grade, got a middle finger longer than Dikembe," or "Like a light-skinned slave boy, we in the motherfucking house." Plus, it's got a super repetitive but memorable chorus, as well as just so many cool sonic moments. I'd be really interested in hearing what Kanye's scrapped album So Help Me God would have sounded like with this being the original lead single for it. But as it stands, All Day still works perfectly well as a Lucy. Kind of a tough choice here, but I think I'd go with The Heart Part 4. Even though I do like All Day a lot, like I said, it just feels very messy at points, and The Heart Part 4 is just a way tighter, more consistent song. And in a fairly shocking turn of events, All Day and The Heart Part 4 legitimately tied in votes, 50% to 50%.
Hello, my only one. Just like the brand new victim of shatter those dreams, the culture.
Now on to the sequel to The Heart Part 4, I'll just come out and say that The Heart Part 5 is absolutely my favorite track in Kendrick's Heart series. Say recency bias all you want, but man, the song is just simply immaculate. The Marvin Gaye sample for one that makes up the instrumental is incredible, but even then, the production really takes a back seat when compared to what Kendrick talks about on the song. Starting with the first and second verses, he tackles a lot of themes that we would eventually see across Mr. Morale, like generational trauma and his own personal struggles with people seeing him as their savior despite still only being human. And man, he is just so good at putting these thoughts into lines that hit so hard. Like the whole section where he mentions seeing guys go to prison for years only to get out and get killed while trying to buy weed days later, or when he says, "But that's the culture, crack a bottle, hard to deal with the pain when you're sober, by tomorrow we forget the remains, we start over, that's the problem." But even still, that third verse where he raps from the perspective of the late Nipsey Hussle as the drums cut out is by far the peak of the song for me, and one of the most emotionally powerful moments across Kendrick's entire discography. Like that line where he's speaking directly to Nipsey's murderer and says, "I forgive you but know your soul's in question." God, does that just cut like a knife? Stop me if you've heard this before, but The Heart Part 5 is yet another masterpiece in Kendrick's catalog, and I'm gonna try not to let it influence my opinion overall, but the music video too, it is so good. And fun fact, the deepfakes in it were actually created by Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the creators of South Park. Crazy. And honestly, I think this matchup is very fitting, since Only One is a similarly powerful track, albeit a lot more insular, and it also features the artist rapping from the perspective of someone else, with Kanye on here rapping from the perspective of his mother Donda to his daughter Northwest. I remember seeing somewhere that Kanye said in an interview that he didn't even remember the lyrics to the song when he wrote it, believing that it truly was his mother speaking through him from heaven. And with how it's written, I honestly could believe it. The way I've always seen it is kind of like as a part 2 to Mama. With Hey Mama, it's all about Kanye showing his love and appreciation for his mom. And with Only One, it's Kanye's mom showing her love and appreciation for Kanye and North from the afterlife. And that message is just so emotionally powerful. The sound of it too really helps, with the mellow chords and Kanye's gentle singing, along with some of the distortion on his voice during the chorus. It really feels like it could fit right along with the other songs on 808s. And Ty Dolla $ign's background vocals are such a great touch. I know that we're like 30 songs in at this point, but again, amazing track. With all that being said though, I think I have to go with The Heart Part 5. It's just another track that I feel is too important to lose, if I'm being honest. Now, not to toot my own horn or anything, but given how close the results are in a lot of these rounds, I take that as a massive compliment to my matchmaking ability, so thank you. But yeah, The Heart Part 5 ended up taking it 58% to 42%.
This is the last call for alcohol for the when shit hit the fan, is you still a fan? When shit hit the fan.
Okay, and now we get to another very interesting round with Kanye and Kendrick's longest songs, with both basically being half song, half skit, and both of them being the closers to one of their albums. So starting with Mortal Man, despite its length, it really is the perfect capper to T-Pad. And Kendrick's verse where he references all these leaders like Nelson Mandela, MLK, Malcolm X, etc. is great. But I will say, it does have that one weird MJ line on it about his child sexual abuse cases. Still though, that's literally like one sus line out of so many otherwise great ones. And man, I still remember to this day the first time I finished this album and heard the entire poem Kendrick recites in this song, only for it to be revealed as part of an interview he's doing with Tupac within the narrative. Genius. And now on to Last Call. Before the skit stuff really starts about 4 minutes in, I think it works as just another fantastic track off of The College Dropout. Classic Chipmunk Soul production, Kanye's got a ton of charisma on it, and of course it has 2 legendary lines with, "Oh my god, is that a black card? I turned around and replied, why yes, but I prefer the term African American Express." And of course, mayonnaise colored Benz, I push miracle whips. And now when it comes to the remaining 8 minutes, I mean, obviously it's literally just the story of how Kanye got his start with Jay-Z and Rockefeller, but I mean, it is still cool. And this will sound kind of weird, but I like how Kanye tells the story. It's very endearing. Like I said, this round is another very weird one, since these 2 tracks are less songs to me and more just stories for their respective albums. But if I had to choose the better song, I think I'd say I prefer the song part of Last Call versus Mortal Man, despite if I think the Tupac interview is a more important moment than Kanye's story. So yeah, I'll give it to Last Call here. And now back to the community vote, we actually have one that I expected to be a little bit closer, with Last Call taking it 66 to 34%.
And I always find something wrong. Promise that you will sing about me. Promise that you will.
Holy shit, what was I thinking with this one? This is like picking between your parents. And by the way, before anyone says anything, yes, technically Jesus Lord Part 2 is Kanye's second longest song, but come on, I can't have this round being an absolute blowout like that. These 2 songs are both on a different level of impressive, so I guess I'll just start with Sing About Me. Before I get into the lyrical content, which there is a lot of, I'll say I love the palette of both halves of this track. The first instrumental is just one of those where I could really hear Kendrick rap over it for an hour and not get bored. It is just such a good background for the writing. And and while I think the second is a little less good, it still does what it needs to do. But of course, the thing that makes this track upper echelon is just what a feat of lyricism it is across its 12-minute runtime. There's just so much to unpack with this song, almost to the point where I don't even want to get into the specifics, because if I do, this segment will end up just being way too long. So for anyone that hasn't heard the song but still wants to know the story of it, I've actually linked the Genius article breaking down every lyric within the description. But still, I cannot recommend listening to this track on your own enough if you haven't. Everything from how it ties into the overall story of Good Kid, Mad City, to all of the different perspectives within it, to all of the deep-rooted themes present within the content absolutely makes Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst arguably Kendrick Lamar's magnum opus in terms of writing, which, as we've seen with a writer like Kendrick, is an incredible feat. And when it comes to magnum opuses, I think Runaway is definitely in that conversation for Kanye West. And like Sing About Me, it's a track where there's just so much to talk about, so summing up my thoughts on it is insanely difficult. I guess starting with the writing, I absolutely adore it. Despite so much of Kanye's musical personality being fueled by his ego, when he's able to separate that and examine his own flaws in a song through his writing like he does on Runaway, it makes for such incredible highs, as we'll see in a song coming up later. But as with a lot of Kanye's best songs, the emotion it's able to convey through the lyricism is still second to the emotion conveyed throughout the sound of the track itself. There are simply so many moments of musical brilliance across this song's 9-minute runtime, from the iconic single note repetition of the piano in the beginning, to the chopped up Rick James sample, to of course one of the greatest moments in Kanye's whole discography at the 6-minute mark, where his vocals are distorted beyond recognition. Like I said with Sing About Me, if you somehow made it this far into this video and haven't heard this song, do yourself a favor and give it a listen, since I really cannot put into words what experiencing the track for the first time is like. All in all though, I'd sum up my thoughts on Runaway by repeating what I think is the best way to describe it, courtesy of a friend of mine. It's not a perfect song by any means. After all, it does have the "I sent this bitch a picture of my dick" line. But all the imperfections within it make the song better than if it was just simply perfect. After all, I think perfect is too boring of a word to describe Runaway. We're once again hit with a battle of top-tier musicianship versus top-tier lyricism for this round. And like with most other rounds in this format, I think I have to go with the better sounding song. But again, I cannot emphasize enough how much of that decision is coming from my own personal preferences within music itself. I would absolutely not judge if this was an easy win for Sing About Me for anyone watching. But for me, I think it's Runaway. And community vote time again, I'm gonna be honest, this one's just a straight up crime, with Runaway taking it 70% to 30%. Even though I do agree, this matchup should be like 52 to 48 in favor of Runaway, not 70-30. You guys are sleeping on Sing About Me, apparently.
You wanna see a dead body?
Alright, now on to two lighter rounds before our big final. Now, one reminder that this round is between my favorite Kanye West and Kendrick Lamar features, so I'm deciding the winner based on who had the better feature of the two, rather than strictly which song is better. So with that, let's start with my favorite Kendrick Lamar feature of all time, being his feature on Nostalgia by Pusha T. I remember giving this track a listen for the first time and getting so hyped up to hear Kendrick's verse after hearing Pusha T kill his over this grimy ass beat, and holy shit did he deliver. Even from the first line where he just says you wanna see a dead body, he just creates such a vivid image of growing up and adapting to a life surrounded by crack cocaine. Then of course you've got all the math wordplay with the numbers 9 and 10, which I'm simply a sucker for, and then the ending after he talks about a conversation with his father about becoming a drug dealer, and flipping that into Kendrick saying every verse of his is a brick, so he metaphorically did become a drug dealer, is just insane. Just a perfect concept for a feature verse on a song called Nostalgia, and perfectly executed. And now funnily enough, this isn't even the first time Smuckers by Tyler the Creator has been a part of a hit battle I've made, since it was included in my Tyler vs. Frank Ocean versus as my personal favorite Tyler track. And no surprise, Kanye's feature here is a big reason as to why. I think the biggest highlight his verse has for me is simply just how many quotables there are. What it lacks an overall narrative like Kendrick's verse has, it more than makes up for in just pure quality bar for bar. You've got the singing intro with the Nikes diss, then richer than white people with black kids, and but I feel like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen at my wedding. I made a million mistakes, but I'm successful in spite of them. It's funny when you get extra money, every joke you tell just be extra funny. And then of course, had a drink with fear, and I was texting God. He said, I gave you a big dick, so go extra hard. I know I'm literally just repeating lines, but that's how memorable they are, and Kanye has the perfect delivery to make them work. I guess it's not surprising given Kanye and Kendrick's different approach to writing, but it does seem crazy how my favorite verses from the two are just so different from one another. If I had to pick though, which I do, I'd probably take Kendrick's Nostalgia verse, it's just the better feature. And God, we get another insanely close matchup with the community vote here, with Kanye's verse on Smuckers taking it 54% to 46%.
Boopy-dee scoop, scoop-dee-dee whoop, whoop.
Trying to strike a chord and it's probably A minor.
So originally I was gonna just do another round of my favorite features from Kanye and Kendrick, but I figured I needed an excuse to talk about the Drake-Kendrick beef again, so I changed it up. And look, I'll just come out and say immediately that Not Like Us is absolutely a better song than Lift Yourself, but I'm judging it based on which track functions better as a diss against Drake. And in that vein, I think these two songs might be closer than you might think. See, for the few of you still unaware of the story of Lift Yourself, basically back in 2018, Drake and Kanye were working on music together in Wyoming, and Ye ended up playing Drake the Lift Yourself beat. And after hearing it, Drake really wanted to use it on the song. So then Ye gives it to him and he starts writing to it. But while he's working on it, Lift Yourself drops with Kanye doing the whole poopity scoop thing over it. And it's assumed that he just did this as a massive troll to Drake, essentially saying in subtext, no matter what you were gonna rap on this track, it still wouldn't have been as good as me just saying random gibberish over it. Which is among one of the pettiest, but most hilarious moves to diss Drake ever conceived. So you gotta give the song credit there. But okay, I'll stop pretending now. It is still Not Like Us. Even with it starting to get pretty overplayed, I can't deny that what this track has done to Drake in just the last 2 months has been absolutely wild. To get a #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 calling Drake a pedophile and a hip-hop colonizer, and then to go to break Drake's own streaming records with it, and then at the pop-out show get absolute legends of the West Coast to all stand together in unity to diss Drake is one of the most diabolical moves I have ever seen. Like, this shit will certainly be going down in the history books. So even if Not Like Us is pretty saturated right now, and even if it's not even Kendrick's best track in terms of pure disses, it absolutely beats Lift Yourself as a diss track, even with Lift Yourself being pretty underrated in that aspect. And community vote time again? Guys, what is happening? Not Like Us did win 56-44, but like this should be 90-10. Come on. But with that, we now move on to the final round of this, quite frankly, exhausting battle between Kanye and Kendrick, with the score tied up 10-10. Even though the score doesn't really matter in this series, it's just an excuse for me to talk about music I love, but you didn't hear that from me. So let's just jump into the final category.
Someday we gon' set it off. Fear that my humbleness is gone. I'm talking fear.
So as per tradition with these hit battle videos of mine, we're gonna be ending with a battle between my favorite song from each artist. And let me just get this out of the way now. These two picks are among my favorite songs ever made, so this is gonna be pretty damn tough. So let's just get started with Fear then. There are really so many reasons why I consider it to be my favorite Kendrick Lamar song of all time. It features 3 stellar verses from Kendrick, each from the perspective of a different age and his greatest fear at said age. With the first verse at age 7, he details the fear of his strict mother. Then the second at age 17, he explores his fear of dying at such a young age in Compton. Then the third verse at age 27 sees him rapping about his fear of losing all of the success he had achieved at that point in his career. And all 3 verses are loaded with so many cutting lines that perfectly convey the feeling of fear. My personal favorite being in the second, where he references police brutality by saying, "I'll probably die from one of these bats and blue badges, body slammed on black and white paint, my bones snapping." It's such a visceral image. The sound of it too is just perfect. Whenever I hear the downtrodden instrumental, it makes me feel exactly how the cover of Damn does. Depressed, lethargic, and just struggling to continue. But it works perfectly with what the song is meant to make you feel. And God, when those strings come in as Kendrick wraps up the final verse referencing all the other tracks in the album, while describing his fears in such a powerful way, it's just one of those moments that simply cannot be replicated. However, the part of this song that truly elevates it to #1 for me is simply its relatability. I mean, everyone on planet Earth fears something, and despite Kendrick talking about just his specific fears on this song, he manages to circle it back around to a near universal sentiment in the hook. If I could smoke fear away, I'd roll that motherfucker up. There's honestly so much more I can mention about this song too, like the biblical allegory to the Book of Job, the reference to the 27 Club, all of the literary devices utilized for further emphasis on certain lines, but I think I made my point here. Fear is just on another level. And admittedly, I won't be going into such detail for Ghost Town, mainly because I already have an entire video breaking down everything in the song. Go give that one a watch after this one, by the way. It's still one of my favorite videos I've ever made, and I think it's criminally underrated. But besides the perfect sampling, instrumentation, placement of features, feature performance, and main artist performance, Ghost Town to me stands above every other song by Kanye because it does what I thought was impossible for years. It functions as a perfect final Kanye West song. Even if it's not the final track that Kanye released, hell, it's not even the final track on Ye, it truly does feel like the finale to the story of the character of Kanye. With Kanye finally letting go of his ego after years and years of some of the highest highs and lowest lows of life, and accepting his faults as a human being, thus allowing nothing to hurt him anymore, and for him to finally feel free. It's a song that just emotionally resonates with me like no other, and that along with it simply being musical perfection, makes it undoubtedly my favorite Kanye West song of all time. And now it's finally time for me to make my choice between these two masterpieces. And before I do, I just want to say I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on which song takes it, since I'd imagine that this is a pretty tough decision for most other people. But as of writing this, I have made my choice, at least for now. I'm going with Ghost Town, meaning Kanye West wins the hit battle with 11 points to 10. And to also end the community voted rounds, we have Ghost Town taking it 74% to 26%. So I guess this final round wasn't as close for you guys as it was for me. And 12,000 words and many, many hours of writing, recording, and editing later, we are finally at the end of the Kanye West vs. Kendrick Lamar hit battle. If you enjoyed, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel with the bell to see more stuff. Also leave a comment letting me know which song won each round in your own personal verses between these two artists. And just one more reminder before we wrap up, this whole thing is in no way an attempt at deciding who's the better artist between Kanye and Kendrick. After all, there are so many songs I could have picked for both of them that would have absolutely swayed the final result. Like I said before, it's just meant to be a fun format for me to yap about some music that I really love. And final thing I promise, but if you'd like to support the channel further than just subscribing, you can now become a member and receive early access to all my videos, as well as a special shout out from me at the end of them. So join up if you're interested, it really does help me out a lot. And by the way, the reason you haven't seen any of the shout outs of members that I've promised, it's because I actually have yet to get any. So if you want to be the first to give me money, the opportunity's still open, I guess. But yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching.